Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Emma. Hi, how are you doing? Welcome back to another episode of The Rex Room. This one has been pretty highly requested. I do think I am going to be making a lot of these specific this specific episode because I have so many books to talk about. This is one that you guys have asked for countless times, and it's all about ancient classics, mythology, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans. I'd like to throw in a little bit of ancient Egypt in here if I can sometimes, and I'm just really excited. So I have, of course, a lot of different things to talk about. Today we're just going to talk about books that I'm going to recommend you from the Greeks, the Romans, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and I'm so excited. I've included, of course, primary texts, I've included Greek tragedies, I've included Roman historians, I've included modern retellings and reimaginings of historical things and events and people from that time, and I'm just so excited. We also have, I think, two classics, as in classics of literature that are about figures from ancient Rome and ancient Greece. So we've got quite the medley, and let's just get into it. I hope you enjoy. All right, cool. So I'm just gonna jump right in. I have class in about an hour, so hopefully that will spur me to be concise, keep it short and sweet, because you guys know I like to talk for absurd amounts of time about one single book at a time. So let's just get right into it. The first book on this episode of The Rex Room is a play. It is the Greek tragedy by one of the most famous Greek tragedians. I can never say that word. It is Aeschylus. If you've never heard of the Oresteia trilogy, it is my favorite of every Greek play I've ever read. I, of course, have not read them all, but this trilogy is just one that I love the most because Aeschylus's writing, and specifically a lot of the speeches concerning a few of the women in here, are just my favorite things ever. So if you have never heard of the Oresteia, it comprises Agamemnon, the libation bearers, and the Furies, or Eumenides. So basically this begins when Agamemnon comes home after 10 years of fighting in the Trojan War, and when he gets back to his kingdom, to his place. So when he gets back to his kingdom of Mycenae, he finds out that his wife Clytemnestra is rightly not very happy with him because Agamemnon is back and he's brought a girl with him. He has Cassandra of Troy with him, and Cassandra is my favorite character, I think, in Greek tragedy, one of just my favorite characters ever. Cassandra was a priestess of Apollo. Apollo was in love with her. Well, I wouldn't really say he was in love with her, but when she rebuffed him, Apollo cursed her to be able to prophesy the future, but no one would ever believe her. So she prophesied the Trojan War, but of course no one listened to her, and it happened anyway. And then when Troy fell, Agamemnon takes her back home to Mycenae. Clytemnestra has been quite busy while Agamemnon has been away. She's been ruling in his stead, and she has actually found a man herself, so a lot of drama ensues when Agamemnon comes back to the palace. There's a lot of murder, a lot of stabbing going on. I don't know why I'm laughing. And from there we follow the son and daughter of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. We have Orestes, who is the son, and we have Electra, the daughter, and they basically get together. They talk about their parents' crimes because, of course, throughout this whole trilogy there's also this curse upon the house of Atreus, which is Agamemnon's house, and it's just been said that there's this huge curse going back generations, and it is now visiting them in the form of murder and bad times. So Orestes and Electra get together, start talking. This play deals a lot with justice and whose role it is to enact revenge or justice. And then, of course, in the last movement, the Furies, you really see that. You get a lot of gods coming down. We have Athena, we have the Furies themselves who haunt Orestes, and then we get the people of Athens coming in and making a judgment on whether what has gone down is really justice, I guess, and seeing how justice manifests in this really cursed landscape. It's just so interesting, going back to the writing and the speeches that Cassandra gives before going into Agamemnon's palace and meeting her fate are just so powerful. They literally give me chills every single time. I don't know if I'd recommend this translation, but you guys know that I always talk about the one translated by Anne Carson. That one actually comprises 3 different tragedies, not all by Aeschylus, but this one is exclusively all by Aeschylus, the 3 plays that make up the trilogy. So I just would really highly recommend. This is one of the first Greek tragedies I ever read. I think it's a really great place to start because Aeschylus is kind of the father of Greek tragedy as well, one of the founding fathers, and it's just really good. So I would highly highly recommend. Not only is it really readable, it's a great story. The speeches are so powerful and well written, and I absolutely adore it. All right, so the second book I've included is actually a historian. It's a history. I found this really interesting, and it's kind of a nice prelude to another book that I put on here because it's kind of in the same style. So this is Fall of the Roman Republic by Plutarch. This is kind of nice as well, relating to another book I put on, because on the back it says that he was a superb dramatic artist and a brilliant popularizer, wow, a writer who has influenced Shakespeare and many others with his vivid studies of the great Greek and Roman leaders, which will become important later on. But basically, he's not really interested so much in precisely the history of the events that go around the fall of the Roman Republic, because this edition, this Penguin Classic, we actually follow mostly characters, and these, well, not really characters, they're real people, but it kind of reads that way because he kind of explains history through the eyes of these individuals. People like Caesar is in here because obviously this leads up to the fall of the Republic when Caesar is assassinated, and we move into the Roman Empire with Augustus as the first emperor of Rome. So super interesting, but it's just really cool kind of seeing the foundation and eventually the dissolution of the Republic and getting into the empire. Right, so the back says that he's interested in character, in the influences of birth and education, and the significance of individual fame and the moral issues that raises. So alongside Caesar, this history chronicles Marius, Sulla, Crassus, Cicero, Pompey, and Caesar. It's just so interesting because there's so much scandal and so much drama and so many conspiracies that come up, and just really seeing how ruthless these people are and the ruthless nature of the Republic, and of course how that builds the foundation for the empire. It's really actually interesting. It's very readable. I read this a few years ago and it was honestly just a really fun time. I always find so much humor in Roman historians specifically. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's purposeful or if I just find it funny, but a lot of the depictions and a lot of the more often than not kind of caricatures and almost larger than life depictions and descriptions of these individuals and their antics and their fame and their philosophies and their kind of day-to-day silly things that they do that really mark them as these very unique people in the Roman Republic, especially if they're in a higher position of power and whatnot. It's just really funny. It's just really funny to me. So I would really recommend this, honestly. This one isn't my favorite of the kind of character-driven, I want to say, descriptions and exploits of the Roman people and the Roman leaders. There is one that I enjoy so much more, which I'm going to get to in a second, but I just thought I would start off with this one if you were looking for a Roman historian, and maybe starting with a little bit of the Republic so you get a little bit of background before you want to venture into the empire and stuff like that. So that is Fall of the Roman Republic. Kind of ordered these so that we could bounce around and talk about different things, talk about primary sources, histories, plays, fiction, and of course this one that I'm going to recommend, which is Cassandra by Christa Wolf. This is a piece of modern fiction. It is a retelling, a reimagining of Cassandra's life, who I just talked about with Aeschylus. She was one of the key players in the first movement, Agamemnon, of that trilogy, and I read this a few summers ago. I really liked it. Just seeing Christa Wolf, who is a really famous classicist, detailing Cassandra's life from her birth, and you really get her background and her family life and how being a priestess of Apollo affects her and how her life changes and her relationship to her family changes. And then of course we get people like Paris coming into the palace and making himself known as one of her father's sons, Priam's sons, and it's just really heartbreaking to see. Like I said, Cassandra's one of my favorite characters from Greek myth ever. Really loved Christa Wolf's writing in here. She has some really devastating lines. This is definitely a very character-focused novel. It doesn't really read like a novel. It's mostly just Cassandra's ramblings, and then of course it ends with her in Mycenae with Agamemnon, with Clytemnestra, and you really just get like, oh my gosh, it's just so good. It's just so good. I would really highly recommend. This version also comes with Christa Wolf's kind of journey to Greece, how she came up with the idea, her research, her inspiration, her philosophy, a travel report, it says, and just so much. It's so interesting. Christa Wolf is just so brilliant, and I would really highly recommend Cassandra, so that is that one. Alright, staying in ancient Greece for a little bit, we have a very famous one that I felt like I should include on this first episode of the Rex Room devoted to the ancients, and that is Plato's Symposium. I read this in 2020 and for the first time, and it was honestly just really good fun. I'm not the biggest fan ever of Plato, reading Plato. He's definitely not my favorite readable fun time, ancient Greek or just ancient anything, classical anything in that matter, to just kind of gravitate towards for fun like I do with a lot of these other ones. But the Symposium was just really fun. Basically, if you've never heard of this, if you don't know what it's about, it's an extremely influential piece of work. Plato is a very famous philosopher, student of Socrates. I don't know why Socrates to me is one of the most annoying historical figures or philosophers. I don't know what it is. He just really grates on my nerves, but that is besides the point. A symposium is a male drinking party exclusively for citizen males of Greece, more often than not Athens, where we are. We're always in Athens. So basically at this party, a whole bunch of men get together, drink, and they decide to all philosophize on love. What is love? Who is love? How do you love? How does love affect you? What is the definition of love? And you just get all these guys who are semi-drunk coming up with these sometimes absurd, sometimes very moving and profound definitions and explorations of love, why we love, who we love, what is the nature of the human being, what is the human condition, and it's just really interesting. My favorite speech was actually Aristophanes' speech, which was so interesting in the way that he kind of configures humans having their origin as two people in one person, and we were a round organism, we were a round creature. We had 2 heads, 4 arms, 4 legs, 2 hearts, and then we would each look out from this round sphere that we were. And then of course Zeus, to punish us, split us right down the middle, cut us in half, and thus we are doomed to spend all of our lives wandering the earth looking for our literal other half, which is where that comes from. So I just really liked it. I think it's a really, really fun exploration. Anyone could read it and get into it, so that's the Symposium. I know I already mentioned Anne Carson, but to speak a little bit about another recommendation, which is If Not Winter, Fragments of Sappho. I think Sappho is just such a nice, beautiful, lyric, readable poet. If you don't know Sappho, she lived on the island of Lesbos in ancient Greece in around 630 BC, I believe, yes. She was a musical genius who devoted her life to composing and performing songs. So, of the 9 books of lyrics that Sappho is said to have composed, none of the music is extant, and only 1 poem has survived complete. All the rest are fragments. The talent that someone has to have in order to make 1-line fragments or 2-line fragments, or sometimes just literally 1 word, so utterly profound and somehow so emotionally insightful and impacting on the reader, is just such a talent. Anne Carson is just so talented, so gosh darn talented, and obviously Sappho herself, a genius, like I said, but these fragments just really invite the reader into so much consideration of what might have been there, or of what this one sentence or this one fragment elicits in you. A lot of times it's so much imagery. It's a portrait of a landscape or of a person or of an animal or bees or music or sound, and it's just so nice because you kind of get this little echo of the past. And of course the nature of the fragments is that it is fragmented, but because of that, it just invokes so much curiosity and almost a desperate need to know what would have been there. And in that desperateness, you yourself as the reader start to insert things and start to imagine what Sappho, what the end of her line that disappears, what she might have been trying to write, what would complete that. And the way that Anne Carson translates these fragments from ancient Greek into English, it's just so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking for something that's very evocative, and evocative in the specific way in that it's very minimalist because you don't have a lot to work with, but I was so surprised. It took me completely by surprise how affected by this I was and how much I loved it. One of my favorite reads of 2020, and I'm so excited to now dive properly into Sappho because I have a collected work of hers with some more, I guess, bigger and more complete poems and some of the poetry first that does survive. But I think this is a great place to start, honestly, with Sappho, or for me it was, because I've only read a bit from her in classes before, so this was just really great and I loved it. Okay, so this is one of the works that I was talking about that I think maybe having read like The Fall of the Roman Republic and seeing these portraits of Caesar and people like him and his contemporaries might be really useful and helpful, because this is one that I just wanted to put on here. It is Julius Caesar by Shakespeare himself. Shakespeare, of course, is so connected and like is always kind of looking back towards the past and touching the ancients, touching the classics, infusing it into his own work. Of course, he's extremely highly influenced by Ovid, by people like these historians that I'm about to talk about, by the Greek tragedies and everything like that, because of course he is. And I just don't think you can really have Shakespeare, and you wouldn't really have Julius Caesar without, of course, everything that came before. So it's just really, really interesting seeing these echoes kind of being brought down the channel, the river, whatever you would like to call it, the ocean of literature. And Julius Caesar, I'm so excited to read it. This is the only one in this episode of the Rec Stream that I haven't read yet, but I believe by the time this is uploaded, I'll be currently reading it, because this is the Dark Academics book pick for February. So, as I'm sure you can imagine, Julius Caesar, it is a history, one of Shakespeare's history plays, historical plays, and in this, of course, we are following the demise, the downfall of Caesar. Caesar gets pretty cancelled, to say the least, and it's just following the conspiracies and Caesar's character and his kind of wish for the Roman Republic, his vision, his contemporaries' vision, and of course the tragic figure, which a lot of people argue who's actually the tragic figure in Julius Caesar. Is it Caesar? Is it Brutus? Is it Cassius? Because of course Brutus and Cassius are famously the prime, I guess, assassinators and planners and conspirators against Caesar to eventually enact his murder and his assassination. So I'm very excited for this. I just think Shakespeare works so well with language when it comes to the ancients, because I read Antony and Cleopatra a few summers ago as well. One of my favorite Shakespeare plays ever, and I'm just really, really looking forward to what he does with Caesar, how he portrays Caesar, and to almost specifically see the inspiration that maybe he took from things like The Fall of the Roman Republic or these historians that I've read and know. I think it's just so interesting to like see things that you love then reflected in a very famous, very influential writer like Shakespeare is just so interesting to me, and to like see how someone you can witness has taken something that you love, like another work that you can see and read and know, and to see how they take it and how they interpret it, and then to see how that affects yourself. It's just like this very like triangulation. I don't know. I just think it's really cool. So I thought I would put this on here. If you would like to get into Caesar, but you don't want to read like the primary work or anything like that, I think reading about it peripherally is always fun too. So that is Caesar. Okay, this next one might honestly be like, I don't want to say it's my favorite on this list, but I just really, really love this history. I think it is so fun. I snorted several times. I read this a couple years ago in uni. It was on the syllabus for a course I took in Roman emperors, all about Roman emperors and stuff like that. And of course we had to read this. It's a work by Suetonius. If any like classical people know what I'm talking about, you probably know what this is, but it was just hilarious. Like I said, part of the reason I enjoy studying classics and part of the reason I love classical studies so much is that it just provides me not only with so much entertainment, of course I love the history, I love everything like that, the knowledge, but it's just so funny to me. This is Lives of the Caesars by Suetonius. This is kind of what I'm talking about as not a sequel or anything like that, but as kind of the same caricature and the same writing of the portraits of Roman emperors that the fall of the Roman Republic, chronicling people like Pompey, Caesar, Marius, Sulla, all of that stuff. This is definitely inspired and stuff like that. It's almost in the same style. Who does it start with? I mean, it would make sense if it started with Augustus. Yes, it does start with Augustus. But of course we have Augustus, and then we have Tiberius, who's next, and then Caligula. It traces Claudius, Nero. This is basically, like I said, portraits of these Roman emperors, because Caesar is the title of Roman emperor. So it's just really, really funny. Suetonius definitely writes things with a lot more magnitude, embellishes things, likes to tell us lots of stories. It's just like story time with Suetonius, and he really, really goes off on these Roman emperors, their vices, their virtues, weird things that they wear, weird things that they do. Caligula tried to make his horse a senator. It starts actually with Caesar and ends with Domitian. As a fund of fascinating, often outrageous anecdotes. Nero singing while Rome burns, tales of adultery, perversion, murder. Every vice is exposed and recorded. Yeah, this is definitely one of the most ridiculous set of biographies I've ever read on the Roman emperors. It's just like really, really good fun. Take absolutely everything with a grain of salt, and that's all I'm gonna say about it, but it's just a really, 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 really funny time. I think it's so interesting, like it's just so interesting, and then to kind of analyze Suetonius himself and all of these people he's talking about, kind of measure it up to history and to truth, and to kind of see what he might be embellishing on and why. Okay, I decided to put another trilogy of Greek tragedies on here, and I decided to go for one by Sophocles. This is the 3 Theban plays. I read this a while ago as well, so this comprises Antigone, Oedipus the King, and Oedipus at Colonus. I do think I prefer Aeschylus over Sophocles, although I haven't read the Theban plays or anything by Sophocles in a while, so that might have changed. But basically, if you don't know what this is about, we are set in Thebes, where these 3 plays take place. So in the play Antigone, we're following mostly Antigone, and all she wants to do is bury her brother Polynices and give him the correct burial rites, and of course do all of the things that one does in ancient Greece when a loved one dies, but she is forbidden from doing so because Polynices is left on the battlefield to rot. He is denied burial rites. Antigone, like, just really, really holding close to this brotherly love, to her ideal, to her belief that everyone deserves to be buried in this way that will allow them passage and allow their soul to leave their body. She goes out in the dead of night and buries him, and of course we follow all the consequences that stem from there. It's an extremely dark tragedy, they kind of all are. And then we move into Oedipus the King and Oedipus at Colonus, which of course chronicles Oedipus, very famous character in Greek tragedy. There's a prophecy about him. He tries his hardest to avoid this prophecy, and in avoiding this prophecy that he will marry his mother and kill his father, what does he do? He falls right into marrying his mother and killing his father. Antigone was definitely my favorite of this trilogy, although I do think the 3 of them are just really, really great. Honestly, I think they're so entertaining, so tragic, so dark, and I would really, really highly recommend this volume. So that is Sophocles. Sappho, please read this. This next one is another retelling of the Greeks. It's about the Trojan War, and it is by Pat Barker, and it is The Silence of the Girls. This is one of the best retellings of the Trojan War I've read. It's all from the perspective of mostly Briseis, who is the slave of Achilles, and it's mostly concerned with the women in the Trojan War, who are basically voiceless, not really granted a voice in Homer's Iliad. And if you do want to read the Iliad, that is amazing, do it. But also, if you don't want to read the Iliad and you want something a bit shorter, more concise, less rambly, you don't have to read the names of 5,000 ships and people's family lines, The Silence of the Girls is for you. So, of course, this does follow Briseis and a lot of the women who are very marginalized in the Iliad, and really gives them a voice, but also shows that they really don't have a voice, hence why it is called The Silence of the Girls. This also traces Achilles' relationship with Patroclus, the really huge tragedy there. I'm never gonna stop crying about The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which is also another really great retelling, but I think The Silence of the Girls is a bit of a lesser known retelling of the Trojan War, and one that deserves a little bit more hype because it's just really, really so blatant and so just in your face and so almost deadpan about the tragedies and the horrors that these women go through, and of course the soldiers go through as well. It just really shows every single problem with the Trojan War and war in general as a human thing, a human machine, and it's just so devastating. Not really a happy read at all. This was our first actually Dark Academics book ever. If you would like to see the live show, I believe it's up on Kira's channel, so I will link that above. One of my professors at uni even recommended this book to his students, so I would really recommend, and that is The Silence of the Girls. Okay, are we making good time? Oh my gosh, I have 10 minutes. Okay, this is the last one. This is another play, but again, it is kind of in the same vein as Shakespeare because this is Prometheus Unbound by Percy Bysshe Shelley. I think most of the recommendations I put on here have so far really had to do with ancient Greece. I'll try next time to skew it the other way, although I am biased. Greece is my bias. If I feel like every classical studies student, you have to ask that question too, if you'd rather Rome, Greece. Although I do really actually like ancient Egypt, studying ancient Egypt as well. It might, if like we had more classes about it, if I had more chances to study ancient Egypt, I think I might have to pick ancient Egypt over Greece and Rome, but unfortunately I don't really have that opportunity very often. I'm on a rant. Anyway, Prometheus Unbound, Percy Bysshe Shelley takes a play by Aeschylus, which I just think is perfect and ties in a lot really nicely with a few of these books I mentioned, because he takes a play by Aeschylus called Prometheus Bound, kind of flips it, turns it upside down, and you get Prometheus Unbound. Of course, this follows the myth of Prometheus who stole fire to give to us so we could be warm and live our lives, and then Zeus punishes him because he hates humans, and so he is destined to be tied to a rock. Actually, he's right there if you can see him. This is a drawing that Lucy made me of Prometheus tied to the rock, and each day an eagle comes and eats his liver for lunch, and it's really not a good time. But as you can imagine, in Prometheus Unbound, there's this whole prophecy. There's this whole prophecy. Zeus is getting angry. There's this whole prophecy about Prometheus that he will relinquish his chains and be the savior of basically the pantheon of the gods, of the Greeks, of humans. This was one of my favorite books of 2020, my favorite play, and it was just absolutely so beautiful. Like Percy Bysshe Shelley's language combined with this retelling of Greek myth is just everything I've ever wanted to ever. And it's also a really, really cool political allegory for the times that Percy Bysshe Shelley was living in. You could use it today, and it's just really, really good. So, highly would recommend, highly, highly, highly. I love it so much. Alright, so thank you guys so much for coming along on this journey of the Rex Room about the ancients. Yeah, if you guys would like a part 2 of this, I literally have like hundreds and hundreds of classical studies books to recommend. Maybe next time I'll make one specifically dedicated to like Egypt or Greece or Rome, because I just have so much to say, and I do tend to limit these episodes to like 10 books, but I literally of course have like literally shelves and shelves of works I could recommend. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was an okay first episode of this topic. Thank you so much for watching. If you read any of these, let me know. If you like them, let me know. If you don't like them, don't tell me. I'll just, no, you can tell me. But yeah, I will see you very soon in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Ciao.